Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Women in Autonomy's first panel of 2023. We're so glad you've joined us. My name is Jen Deitch. I'm one of the program managers at Women in Autonomy. And if you're not familiar with us, we're a group that was formed to educate, equip, and empower women building autonomous technologies across industries, including automotive and mobility, so that female voices can be better heard and represented. We have a great international panel today of leading women in the industry from Europe, Detroit, and the Silicon Valley. And we'll be talking about our electric future, our carbon-free future, and how we get there. We will have about a 35 minute panel followed by a Q&A session. So we encourage you to put your questions into the chat during the panel discussion so that we can get to it afterwards. And without further ado, I would love to introduce our moderator today. You're probably familiar with her stories. Alexa St. John is a Detroit-based reporter for Business Insider, where she covers the automotive industry and electric vehicles on the transportation desk. She focuses on EV startups, on charging infrastructure, and on the global battery supply chain. And Alexa, we are so thrilled to have you moderating today.
Thanks so much, Jen. I've been really looking forward to this. I've absolutely very excited to have this opportunity. And I'm really excited, especially to introduce our three special esteemed industry experts. So we'll introduce Bonnie Datta, the founder of Plug to Grid Strategies, Carolin Funk, a partner at Blue Bear Capital, and Qiong Sun, Vice President and General Manager of the Automotive e-mobility business at TE Connectivity. So thank you all for joining us. I know this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and I know we have a lot to get to. But first, I'd love if you could each maybe say a few more words about your work, your focus areas. Perhaps, Bonnie, we can start with you.
Thanks so much, Alexa, and thanks to the WIA team for hosting this dialogue. Really excited to be part of it. My name is Bonnie Datta. I've been an ardent advocate of all things powered by electrons since my pivot from disrupting telecom into clean tech, and initially focused on advanced metering infrastructure and grid software platforms at a startup that was bought by Siemens, and then deep dived into electric transportation about a decade ago now. I work with early stage startups as part of my advisory firm now, but remain very active in promoting policies that will drive electrification in the transport space. And I've also managed to co-found an infrastructure startup that remains in stealth right now.
Carolin?
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for organizing and participating. A little bit about my background and then about what we do at Blue Bear. I spent my whole career working on energy transition related topics. Originally, I'm a mechanical engineer. Then I worked on policy back in Berlin, Germany. That's where I'm from. And I moved to the Bay Area, work in the corporate world a little bit, and at Siemens. Actually, that's how Bonnie and I met. And then moved over to the startup side, was head of operations COO at two different energy storage startups. And now I'm an investor at Blue Bear Capital, where we focus on software and data-centric technologies for energy, infrastructure, and climate. We invest in post-revenue startups, so everybody who already has a couple of customers, and the majority of their business growth comes from software and data. Feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, our thesis at Blue Bear is that we're going through this $1 trillion transition in the energy sector, and we believe that that software and data will also eat the world. And so that's why we focus on that space. We have made a number of investments in the intersection of grid and transportation, but we'll get into that later on in the conversation.
Thanks so much. And Qiong?
Great. Thank you. Great to be here. And I am really looking forward to a great conversation with all of you here today. I am Qiong Sun, responsible for an over $1 billion automotive e-mobility business at TE Connectivity. We are a $16 billion global leading technology company in connection systems and sensors. For the past 28 years, I have been working for some of the major automotive tier 1 suppliers like ZF, Johnson Controls, Lear Corporation. And I have led many of the innovations and development of advanced technologies in vehicle electrification, energy storage, charging infrastructure, active safety systems, and connected vehicles as well. I really enjoy my work and have the great opportunities to work on and work with many of the smart engineers and designers to create the products from the concept and then introduce them to the market, launch them for mass production in millions of vehicles. Also, I have the chance to work with almost all the vehicle manufacturers around the world. So it is great to be in this industry, help accelerate the transformation of the future mobility, and really excited, being part of this. And currently, I work and live in Zurich, Switzerland, as Jennifer mentioned. And yeah, it's great to be here with this great panel.
Thank you so much. It's really helpful to hear each of your focus areas. I definitely think this is going to be a fantastic conversation, trying to get to all of those topics. But let's get started. Maybe we'd like to hear from each of you on this, given your unique lens into this space. We could probably spend the entire session on just this one question, but what really is the single biggest challenge to widespread EV adoption today? And Qiong, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I think the battery technology and also the cost of the battery are the biggest challenges for the EV adoption. Let's start with the range anxiety. Today in North America, range anxiety still considered a top concern for the consumers, according to many of the recent surveys. As you know, in North America, people do a lot of long distance driving. Maybe this is a lesser concern in Europe or in Asia Pacific, as the public transportation is widely available. However, if it is you truly need to have a long distance traveling, you don't want to end up somewhere that you don't have any charging station to go further. Today, we see a lot of offerings from almost all the OEMs with a battery that can cover long distance, 250 miles, some are like a 300 miles range for a single charge. But the problem is these batteries are very large and very heavy. EVs are very expensive and also weigh a lot more than the equivalent internal combustion engine vehicles. So consumers end up paying more for EVs. Usually it is not an issue if it's a premium segment, as people willing to pay for it. But if we need to see a mass adoption, these EVs need to be actually available and cost effective for all class, including those smaller class A, B, and C type of vehicles. And for the industry, it is extremely important for us to have the battery technology to make it cheaper and also lighter. And for me, also, the second part is the recharge time for these batteries is another big concern. And for fully charge a battery, usually it takes about 3 or sometimes 8 hours overnight with a level 2 charging station. And even with the fast DC charging, it will take about 30 minutes for 80% of the battery capacity. So the battery technology to allow these safe and fast charging is extremely important. So that's why, to me, until we got the battery technology that become affordable and make the range anxiety no longer issue, and also the recharge time is not an issue, then I will see the EV adoption will be there.
Carolyn, Bonnie?
Yeah, happy to go next. I think I totally agree that the range anxiety is a big issue and a big question mark for people who want to make the switch. I would pinpoint the other side of the aspect that Qiong had mentioned is really the charger availability. That could also really help mitigate that kind of thought of, oh, how am I going to get from A to B? Where am I going to, when I'm going to get charged? And I think it's important that the charging infrastructure needs to be built out, at the on the road, if you will. In the big corridors that people are traveling, at home and at people's destination. So if you go shopping, if you go to work, where you park your car, you want to be able to charge there. But also at home. And at home, it's much easier and more prevalent with people who have single family homes. But the issue, I think, a big issue is the multifamily dwellings and how people are going to get to charge overnight there. Because, yeah, it might take hours to charge, but most vehicles are parked for, I don't have the exact number, but I think, if I remember right, it's more than 85% of the day. So we can charge them. The second part, apart from building out the infrastructure more, which I think we're getting better at, is that the chargers need to be actually available and functioning. Some studies from last year, for example, one from the Bay Area, found that 23% of public chargers in the Bay Area were broken for one reason or another. So not available because the hardware is not working, because they're not connected to the internet, which is needed to initiate a charge, to be able to pay for a charge, or maybe the user interface just didn't work and folks just didn't know how they could get that started. So 23% is actually at the lower number. We've read other studies where it's up to 40% that chargers are not available. So we really need to fix that issue, because if you're looking to plan your day and charge at specific locations, you have to be sure that it just works.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Carolin and Qiong's perspectives. And I think the reliability and availability of public charging is today the biggest hurdle we face from broad-based EV adoption from the early adopter segment. Adding to Carolin's statistics in the Bay Area, the reliability percentage of one of the leading public charging network in the United States was just 61%. I mean, think about it. How many times do we go to a gas pump to fill our ICE vehicles and find the pump not working? It just doesn't, it's not common. And so why should that experience be, an exception for electric driving? Like, again, what Carolin and Qiong mentioned about, single family home or long dual sites, as we choose to call them, 70 to 80% of charging is going to happen in these sites, but public charging is a psychological barrier that we need to overcome to make this go mass. And in reality, the average miles we drive in the US is 40 miles a day. So, technically at 200 miles EV, being charged at a long dual site is enough for daily usage. So it's really a psychological barrier. And then the other thing that I would like to point in terms of hurdles or something that we need to keep in mind going forward, and since we're all women out here, is things that are important for women drivers, which is, how safe or what is the physical location of the public charging station? How safe is it? What kind of, features are there? Those kind of things are very important if we're going to make this fuel transition.
Really, really excellent points from each of you. I know we'll be touching on those more, but of course, given this is a Women in Autonomy event, I think it's crucial we also spend a couple of minutes talking about autonomous driving and AVs today. So from each of your perspectives, in what ways is electrification and this transition to EVs really tied also to the future of autonomous?
I could go first and say that I would probably reverse the order, Alexa, and say, how is the future of autonomy tied to electrification? And I would probably argue that AVs must be fueled by electrons and clean electrons if they are to have a future. We currently have some autonomous vehicles, especially in the last mile segment, that are still running on fossil fuel. Very soon they will be facing clean fleet mandates. So they really need to start making this transition. And there are use cases where there is potentially another clean fuel that might be a better solution. But I think move away from fossil fuel to have a future is a must for autonomous vehicles in any segment.
I can agree more with the Pani. The autonomous vehicle and electrification, they go hand in hand. Really autonomous vehicle, we are putting the driver hands-free pretty much. And I can't imagine that we still need to go to the gas station to fill the fuel into it. And all autonomous vehicles need to be full electric. And the electrical systems or electronics devices should be all powered by the battery. I don't know in the audience if you know the energy efficiency difference between these two types of vehicles. For the typical internal combustion engine vehicle, actually 1/3 of the fuel energy actually become the exhaust and heat to the air instead of driving the wheels. And if you go on to the US Department of Energy website, it will show the, EV converts, 80% of the electrical energy from the grid to power the wheels. And the conventional gasoline vehicles, only about the 12 to 30% of the energy actually power the wheels. They are all, become either, the exhaust or heat and dissipated. So this is why so important autonomous vehicle needs to be a full battery electrical vehicle.
And if I can geek out a little bit, I have spent way too much time thinking about the grid and how this all relates to the grid. I think, especially if we're thinking autonomous vehicles will first be adopted on the fleet side, and there it's really like thinking about an airplane that needs to be making money all the time. Autonomous vehicles are going to be somewhat expensive assets, so they need to make money as much as they can, or be in operation as much as they can. And I think if we can expand that from the vehicle itself delivering stuff from A to B to the battery as an asset that can be utilized to the grid, like a local virtual power plant, or I'm not going to get into more 3-letter acronyms here, but then we can actually see in some studies that a battery electric vehicle on the grid can make up to $150 an hour if it's plugged in at the right point in time at the right location with nodal pricing. So I think just stacking up the value that autonomous fleet vehicles will be able to bring to their owners and operators is going to be a really interesting thought over the next, let's say, probably 5 to 7 years, hopefully.
Absolutely, certainly something to be keeping an eye on. Now, I'm curious what you all have noticed about 2023 in particular. And of course, there are all these dynamics at play that we've already mentioned. I myself am noticing both sort of this sense of reality setting in for the industry, but also so many different efforts really materializing as it relates to the EV transition. And we know, of course, so much of the past few years has been a lot of hype, so much investment into electrification. It feels like the industry knows now those plans really do have to take shape with so much momentum. Curious what you think. Maybe we can start with Bonnie.
Yeah, well, for those of us who've been in this space for a while, Alexa, before this became this kind of gold rush thing, we've anticipated some kind of correction in the markets actually sooner than later. And we're starting to see this in terms of the buyouts, the SPAC shine coming off. You saw Nicola's SEC filing last week's alerting about what potentially might happen to their business. The fact is, this is a very complex business that we are in. I do not want to kind of undermine the complexity of it. You have two very diverse verticals coming together to work together, which is the vertical of energy and the vertical of transportation. And you actually do have to have skill sets in, if not both the sectors, but at least in one, to be able to come up with some viable pathways of business in this new sector. I often joke about it, say, some of us who chose to be in electric transportation chose it not because it was an easy thing to do, but it is a hard thing to do. And that's where the challenge and the fun is. But you're totally right about reality setting in.
Maybe I can go second. Two things I'm really excited about. I think the OEMs have understood that this is the path forward, and are full force on this. Yeah, I think that's super exciting. We're going to see many more vehicles, models on the roads. People have options now. It's not that you have to be able to afford a Tesla or be stuck with a Leaf, and those are your two options, and you can't get anything in between. There's so many exciting vehicles in different sizes and ranges. Together with some of the tax credits, they also become affordable to everybody, hopefully. And the other thing I'm excited about is that infrastructure companies are partnering with OEMs on the EV charging build out. And I think we need those kind of combined efforts, as Bonnie was saying. So if, for example, reading the news about Daimler partnering with M&8, which is Goldman Sachs infrastructure development spinout, partnering with Daimler, there's a lot of capital understanding, and there's a lot of understanding from kind of the automotive side coming together here. And this is just one example. On the other hand, yeah, we're at the top of, or maybe at the kind of climbing down part of the hype cycle. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We've attracted a lot of talent to the space, and they will want to stay in the space and figure out just new paths forwards as some of the companies get acquired or maybe even downscale. And I don't think there will be a shortage of need of people who have battery understanding in their CV, understanding on charging infrastructure, and things like that in general. So if you're looking to get into the space, I think it's still a really good one.
Yeah, so I will add a little bit, the hypes in the past, it was true, but now I do believe EV is becoming very real. And the way I look at it is really the demand and the supply side, the economy 101, right? And, from the demand side, this is truly the first time we are seeing actually broader consumers who wants the EV. I'm talking about not just the early adopters, but also the people from everywhere, including the people working in the automotive industry. And that really actually says a lot. There is a huge demand out there. There are people, waiting, putting their the money deposit. And the second part is looking at the supply side. As Carolin said, the OEMs are offering all kinds of battery electrical vehicles. So you have a lot of choice from different type of segment and different type of vehicles available to the market. So every single OEMs, whether it's pure EV companies or any traditional OEMs around the world, they are having extremely aggressive electrification investment and the launch plan, and investing multi-billion dollars on those battery EV assembly plants. So I do see, both the demand and supply side are there. And also, on the top of it, we're seeing the government, right, providing a lot of incentives and subsidiary, and those can be permanent, but it is very, very important just to help close some of the price gap, because while EV volumes still need some time to ramping up the volumes. So in the end, definitely, I think that the EV will become a lot more of a affordable for any type of, consumers.
Certainly. And I think we all make excellent points here. Carolin, I want to touch on you more here, given your role. Thinking about concerns over the broader economic environment right now, perhaps some waning faith from investors in mobility startups. Do you see any sort of slowing of momentum? It doesn't really sound like it. You certainly mentioned excitement and such, but have these dynamics influenced what sort of opportunities and startups you're looking for right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and wish we had a glass bowl here and knew what the future would hold. But I think two things. Obviously, the correction and the markets and the dynamics in 2022 have caused some caution also in the early stage investment space. But I see that much more from more generalist investors. I'm actually at a conference right now with about 70 peers in the clean tech, climate tech space. And there's a lot of capital that is available for deployment in the room here. So we are really looking for, and more than ever, and I think that's the one thing that might have changed, is what are the real value drivers in this industry? And for example, we did a map of startups that are active in software for EV charging last year in the second half. And we just found about more than 70 startups that provide some type of software in the kind of EV charging space. So it's a really busy map. And then figuring out where are actually the profit pools from that, because it's hard to start a company, but to really scale, not from 0 to 1, from 1 to 10, and then further on, we have to dig deep where things are really happening. And our first investment in 2023, excitingly, is in a space, a company called Charger Help, and they provide uptime guarantee, reliability as a service for EV charging station owners and operators. And I think that's really, as to my point earlier, unlocking a little bit of a bottleneck. So we're still discussing here if we are in the energy and climate tech space, if we're just delayed in the correction, or if we're a little more kind of protected from what's going on in the larger market, just because there's so much also, as we mentioned, the government side driving this forward. So far, we're going strong, and yeah, I think the end of 2022 view on, well, 2023 will be maybe more tightening the belt, and and slower movement on the investment side. I'm not seeing that happening in the first 2 months of the year.
I would say, I'd like to add and say amen to Carolyn, and it's great that, you know, Blue Bear's invested in a people tech company, Carolyn, and just not software. You know, there are everything in the world is not solved by software, shall we say. But Alex, I think what I would probably just add is that in my view, what we are seeing is consolidation that is very typical of early stage technology, as Carolyn was mentioning. You know, numerous startups come into a space, then the competitive market kicks in, and then so does survival of the fittest, you know, in terms of business model, in terms of technology. I mean, if you look at the last automobile revolution that we had, you know, 100 years ago, there was something like 2,000 companies that formed, and, you know, less than 10% survive today. So I think it's just part and parcel of the sine curve of business startups, in my opinion.
Bonnie, I want to stick with you on many of these points, especially given your expertise in charging infrastructure, which, you know, we heard earlier is really one of the biggest barriers right now. I'm hoping you can talk about the role that policy plays and really how crucial it is for the EV transition. You know, we have things like the Inflation Reduction Act. Qiong mentioned incentives, subsidies. Certainly funding is one part, as we heard from Carolyn, but can you talk more about the role of policy, and especially for the auto supply chain here in the US?
Love to. In fact, I'll argue again that policy and supporting regulations are probably what got us here today, where we are. I mean, Norway is going to phase out ICE vehicles in less than 2 years. And that's the prime example of what policy can drive. The key question, I think, is how policy paves the next segment of the highway, if you will, no pun intended. You all have mentioned a lot about the funding. We have taxpayer funding, we have ratepayer funding, and then, which has kind of provided the tailwind so far, and now comes the federal dollars. So I think the challenge is how effectively are these funds going to be spent by government entities to create a charging infrastructure that works for all? How do states implement or interpret the technical guidance that the NEVI program has issued to ensure that drivers have a seamless experience as they drive interstate? How do states and other entities attract private dollars to supplement this public funding? How do they safeguard the amount of public funding that's going into the space? I was reading a statistics in the Economist magazine the other day, and it's said that state incentives typically work out to be roughly around $5,000 per created jobs, per job. And the EV incentives already amount to something like 30,000 per created job. Think about the kind of difference we are in terms of the incentive world we're living in. You talked about onshoring of supply chain. The Biden administration's plan to do so is shattering all expectations. You know, I believe the battery incentive is going to be 4x what the budget office, the Congress budget office, had estimated. Something like $72 billion were committed in planned plans just last year alone. So I think policy will continue to be, and consequent regulations will continue to be front and center if we are going to meet the 2030 goal of being, 50% new vehicle sales being electric in the United States, in my opinion.
Really important points about the impact of policy, funding, investment. Qiong, I really want to lean on you for this. What then are you seeing in terms of, the introduction of new products and the pace of these, bolstered by that policy, by that funding? How do we get these technologies that further both the EV and the AV transition from concept to mass production to keep up with everything that's going on in the industry?
So as I mentioned earlier, battery is the challenge for the EV adoption. And that's because the battery is the most critical component in EVs. And also it is the most expensive one, not to mention, a lot of safety requirement for the battery. So any new technology that can help advance the battery products to improve the overall safety, improve the energy density and the fast charging capability are all very, very important for accelerating the EV adoption. So I was just giving some example in terms of, the battery, the cell technology for the cathode, the anode, the electrolyte, and that they continue advance to providing, the better energy density product. And also, if you look at in the past, we make the battery cell to battery module and from the battery module to the battery pack. And today, these are actually advancing to just directly from the battery cell to the pack or even battery cell to the chassis as a part of the structure of the vehicle. So these all continue, these advancement of the technology helping bring the cost down significantly. And then the other one is the currently very popular topic for the EV community is the solid state battery technology. And the electrolyte is no longer liquid. And you can imagine, it's going to be even better for the energy density. And even though this technology has a great promising, but still today it's a very small quantity for the production, and the quality control still has a lot to be solved. But I really see in the future this will become, the trend for the EV world.
Certainly.
Maybe to add one point where I see a lot of important movement also being made is on the recycling side of batteries. Really new technologies that are able to separate, not just technologies, but more processes that are able to separate the different materials within the battery pack, because it's not like our very standardized AAA batteries that we kind of hand over to recycling and they will be recycled. These electric vehicle batteries, they all have different form factors. They all have a little bit of different materials inside them. So it's not as straightforward, but I'm seeing a lot of research, but also things that are getting really into the market now. That makes me hopeful.
What a great point, Carolyn. Definitely, as we talk about the carbon-free future, right? I definitely see that these recycling and the reuse and reduce all these material, the product, and continue the loop of to actually have a sustainable environment. This is definitely technology will play a significant role in this space.
Certainly a lot of room for opportunities, new challenges, new solutions. One thing I've been wondering about too is, electrification and autonomy, of course, we all know here, doesn't just have an influence on the world of light duty passenger vehicles. Other spaces, fleet, commercial, really require new solutions as well. So I'd love to hear from each of you more on the nuances, perhaps, between solutions meant for consumers and, for those other applications.
Maybe I could go on that, Alexa, and perhaps just a quick word, additional word on the passenger side of the vehicle world before we move to the others, the commercial sector. Almost 35% of the US population live in apartment buildings. And I think ensuring drivers from these apartment buildings participate effectively in this fuel transition is incredibly critical for going mass adoption of driving electric. You know, there are some misguided approaches in some of the incentive programs we see where they're incentivizing level 1 charging. I mean, let's look at the reality. It takes anything between 40 to 67 hours to charge a 200-mile electric vehicle. Why would you spend money in level 1? These drivers should be given high power level 2 charging in every parking spot and access to fast charging on premise or nearby, if we expect them to fully participate in this transition. Let's now pivot to the commercial fleet segment, which is really the most exciting part of the transition, at least in my opinion. We're talking about diverse vehicle classes, from the class 2B SUV to the 18-wheeler truck. We're talking about diverse business models, you know, talk about large rental fleets to private fleets. 90% of truck operators in the United States and Canada operate 10 or less trucks in their fleet. But whatever that may be, I think the key factor is, how do we ensure that it's an efficient total cost of ownership? It's just not about the capital expenditure, but the ongoing operating expenditure. How do we control the energy cost, which is the fuel cost, if you will, which is the second highest after the driver cost to fleet operators? How do we ensure the interoperability and the high reliability that is required to ensure that vehicles are being able to perform their duty cycle? How do we put behind the meter energy storage or other form of on-site generation to ensure resiliency and availability? As I can mention, these vehicles they can't stop just because power goes out or something like that. I think, you know, fleet electrification to me, again, is really most exciting because it gives the opportunity for diverse technologies to come into play behind the meter. At least to wonky geeks like us, I think it's very exciting.
So
And
besides,
just
go ahead.
Jon. Sure. Okay, I'll jump in. So just two very quick things on this. One is, I think we see a lot of interesting partnerships being built around, like, from a commercial vehicle perspective, like who owns the vehicle, who owns the battery of the vehicle, and then who operates the vehicle. And I think with more technology around kind of insights into battery and values of the asset, we see new investors coming into the space, just kind of in a lot of, for example, in bus electrification, that a community does not have to own and pay the full amount of a new electric bus fleet, but they can figure out new ways of leasing, buying the vehicle, leasing the battery. Very different and creative options are coming out here. So that's the one point. And then the other point I'm excited about is we also have a path for hybridization of current internal combustion engine driven trucks. Speaking especially about like tractor trailer vehicles, where you can just put, and a couple of companies are doing that, put kind of a battery type drivetrain in between the tractor and the trailer, and just increase the energy efficiency of the vehicle tremendously. So we don't have to go from black to white. There's a lot of shades of gray in between, but batteries are flexible enough that we can use them even as kind of a retrofit.
So besides the commercial vehicles and the buses Bonnie and Carolin mentioned, I have to say, I was so surprised to find out the construction and agriculture vehicles are also electrified, and they are actually outperforming the passenger cars. So at this year's Consumer Electronics Show, Caterpillar announced that they have traveled nearly 200 million kilometers autonomously with a zero injury. Also, John Deere, they have the autonomous tractor, actually won 2 innovation awards, and with autonomous farming, they call it creating more with the less, and using the autonomous driving, smart sensing, artificial intelligence to plant the seed, spray the fertilizer, and overall just to improve the efficiency of their farming equipment. And then also a lot of industry like a robo-taxi, electrical, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. They are all fully electric and autonomous to enable advanced taxi and air mobility. So to me, like anytime one industry is developing those new technology and the other adjacent industry, they get a benefit from each other because of this help increase the scalability, and it also help to drive the cost down. So this is a very crucial for the suppliers working in this industry, and they can provide the same technology or the product's solution to broader customer base.
Absolutely. No, I think it's so important that we touch on that space as well. And you all bring really excellent points to that. I'll be mindful of our time. I think it's time to switch to the Q&A portion of this. And we have a couple of questions to get to before we close. This one, I'm very excited to hear what you all have to say. What are the challenges you see and actions we can take to increase women's participation at the leadership level in the EV industry? And does this transition open up new opportunities to do better in this regard relative to the traditional auto industry?
I can jump first on this, and just going back to the charger help example that I gave in an earlier question. We can all make decisions based on where we invest time and money in. So for me, it's investing money. Charger Help are 2 female founders who started the company based on their experience, both in like workforce transition. We really need to train folks and give them an agency in that energy transition to be able to participate as, for example, an EV charging electrician. EV charger electrician. So I'm super excited. If you as a woman now want to start a business in the space, I think that's a really good time, because folks are looking at exactly that. And I think we bring a lot of ideas and very practical, sometimes a much more practical set of problems and approaches to the world than our male counterparts. So I see a lot of that already going on. Can we be better? Yes, of course, we can be a lot better in that. But yeah, let's all look who's behind what we're wanting to buy or wanting to drive, and maybe we can challenge the folks that are in the market today.
I would probably just add to Carolin's point and say, by far the primary decision maker in car purchase are women, and they better than anybody else would have insights on how we could transition this industry more efficiently, more creatively. At the end of it, what we are looking for is, as an industry, we need to not make driving electric a science experiment with lots of, math calculation and planning and all of that. If we are able to do that, and hopefully these are, smart, hardworking women who can show these pathways, if we're able to kind of make this become as easy as driving ICE, I think we are going to be at the point where we are ready for the hockey stick to take off, the graph to take off, if you will.
So I will give you from a different perspective. I worked in a big corporation for almost 30 years, and out of those 20 years, mostly in electrification. And one thing I would say is I have met a lot of women in this space and a lot of women leaders. And one thing is, you know, this is actually industry is not a conventional, not the 100 years old ICE engine. And women really bring a lot of innovative ideas into this to the table. And I see so many women leaders in whether in the battery, in the motors, in the vehicle architectures, charging infrastructure everywhere. And also I do believe women have such a resilient. I mean, I went through so many rounds of EV goes up as the hypes we are talking about, EV disappear. But you know what? I'm still in this industry and I'm still excited about it. And I know so many of you all like me. And I really welcome you all joining the force and become this force to help accelerate this EV. I think, you know, EV is not just for automotive, it's for everywhere. And, you know, the carbon-free, you know, electricity is going to be the future for us.
Absolutely. I certainly find myself agreeing with all of you, and very excited to continue to follow this space and see how it evolves. I think we have a minute for one more final question here. We'll call it a bit of a lightning round. But ultimately, what really does the industry still need to address for all stakeholders to feel comfortable with this shift to EVs? We've talked about the availability of charging infrastructure, navigating government incentives, battery technology, all of these things coming together, really converging right now. What's next, I guess, is a good way to wrap up.
I can go.
Go first, Qiong.
Okay, all right. You know, actually, you know, early Carolin also mentioned same thing. You know, to me, it doesn't stop just at the vehicle level, the carbon-free. The carbon-free go beyond that, and not only about the whole circular economy, and it's even about how you produce actually the vehicles. And that's why the production plant of producing need to be actually rely on the clean energy, and also the you know, in terms of the end of the life of those vehicle, the battery, what's the second usage of those battery? They can be used for stationary energy storage, and they can be, you know, recycled into making the new batteries and all those things. So I do see, you know, there is a lot for a society to take care of our environment, and there is so many things that need to be done beyond just the vehicle.
I would probably, Alexa, reiterate the importance, the practical importance of things to the person who was purchasing or thinking about going electric, which is the price of the vehicle, and can I fuel the vehicle where and when and how I want it. These are practical things. And once we, as an industry, and I put myself right in the center of that and say, we need to be able to fix these simple things that address the primary concerns of a person thinking about going electric.
All right. I think what I would love to close on is the question of, like, if I buy a vehicle, what's it going to be worth in the future? How can I resell it? Or if I buy a used vehicle, how do I know what I'm actually getting? The cool thing is that there's a lot of software data available. The uncool thing is that a lot of that is owned by the automotive OEMs or other parties. So I would love to see a third-party validation, kind of an electric vehicle battery passport like Europe has started to discuss and implement, so that we all know, what we own and or what we buy, because it's a black box for us right now. It should be a black box, but maybe somebody can kind of give us information about what's in it, so we don't have to take it apart ourselves. So let's hopefully get to some third-party warranty information and better insurance based on that.
Certainly, I know there's a lot of demand from the consumer for more information, still trying to figure out exactly how an EV will fit into their lifestyle, what it might mean, what sorts of nuances they have to get used to. So excellent points from everyone here. I think that'll just about wrap up our discussion and our Q&A. Thank you again so much for participating in this. I've learned a lot myself, gotten some ideas from this conversation. So thank you so much for the time, and I'll hand it back to Jen for final words.
Thanks, Alexa. And thank you, Qiong, Carolin, Bonnie. Such a fascinating discussion. There's so much to learn in this field, and it will be really exciting to see how it unfolds in the coming years. I want to let you all know about Women in Autonomy, how you can get involved. We have a lot of programs. We have mentorship and speaking programs and newsletters, and we'd love for you to follow us so you can stay informed. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, pretty much all the social channels. You can go to our website, womeninautonomy.com, to join our mailing list. And we would love to stay in touch with you. And if you or your company would like to get involved, feel free to reach out to us at info@womeninautonomy.com. So thank you all again for joining us. Thank you to our moderator and panelists, and we'll see you next time.